Hello and welcome to my video. In this video I'm going to take you through how I refinished this mid-century modern writing desk. It has a laminate top and some other issues going on, but overall it's an awesome little desk with so much potential. I always start off by walking around and just making sure that I know what repairs I need to make before I start working on the dresser. And I always check the drawers. I checked them before, but it's always good to double check and make sure that there's not anything that you missed. It's easier to fix things with wood glue or whatever else you need to fix it with before you start working on it and changing things. For example, this main part of the desk actually had a split in the wood, so I'm going to have to fix that. And just taking a look at the top, this is all laminate top and it is completely a different color than the rest of the body of the desk, which makes me wonder what the original color of the desk was, whether it was that same yellow color or not. To clean this desk, I chose to use something a bit more harsh than a TSP or degreaser. I ended up grabbing my CLR mold and mildew cleaner. This will strip off or damage any finishes, so I only recommend using it if you're going to be refinishing the furniture you're spraying it with. And the reason I grabbed my CLR mold and mildew cleaner is because when I initially inspected the desk, it had spots on it, which could have been the start of furniture mold. It could have also been something else. It wasn't very powdery looking just yet, so either way, I chose to use the CLR cleaner, and that cleaned it completely off of the furniture. There was also some, I think, possibly dead bugs inside of the desk that I saw after I had taken the drawers out. Just quickly vacuumed those up with my shop vac. And then I also wiped the inside of the desk down as well. It's always a good idea to check inside of these things and make sure that you're getting rid of any other potential hazards or things that are going to make your workspace more dirty. One of the first repairs that had to be made was to the body of the desk. We had gaps on the body that needed to be filled, and the best thing to do for this is to use wood glue and fill the seams. And then once you have the seams filled, you use clamps and you clamp the sides together. You're going to want to make sure that you wipe back the wood glue with a damp cloth. It's a lot easier to clean up if it's wet as opposed to hardened wood glue, so just remember that. Speaking of wood glue, when I purchased this desk off of Facebook Marketplace, they had it listed as the leg needed repair. When I arrived, they said, "Oh, we already glued the leg on to make it more sturdy." What they really did was pour wood glue over the leg corner. I don't think they used clamps for this because this triangle that was attached to the wood was still sort of popping out. I ended up using my chisel to chisel off the wood glue remnants and sanding it down. I also drilled out the holes for the top to screw down to the desk to clear out more of the glue. Please don't do this to your furniture. There are better ways to fix it, I promise. Next up is prep work, and needed to start by removing these really cool looking handles that were on the drawer fronts. And I'm going to end up cleaning these down and then painting them at the end, but they're really nice and match the desk really well, so I'm definitely keeping those. After the poles were out of the way, I decided to scrape off the finish. The finish was very thin, and I scraped off all 3 drawers pretty easily. I didn't want to risk potentially over sanding, as I couldn't tell if there was veneer on the drawer faces, and this was a safer way of getting the finish off. It's also quite a bit more satisfying, if you couldn't tell. The legs have metal covers on the bottoms. They're typically attached with a small little nail. Those popped off fairly easily, so I went ahead and took all 4 of those off of the legs. I ended up taking my orbital sander, and I have a foam pad that acts as a buffer for the sanding disc, and I used 120 grit sandpaper and gently sanded off the finish on the legs, which were solid oak. Very nice construction. I waited 24 hours for the wood glue to fully cure and dry, and came back with my helpers and removed the clamps off of the desk. And if you can't tell already, the seams are basically gone, minus some wood glue seepage that happened, but it's very minimal. After the clamps were out of the way, I decided to also scrape the entire body of the desk. It's either sand it and kick up a bunch of dust, or use paint stripper, or scrape it off. And again, because this finish is so thin, it came off relatively easily, and I was able to scrape off the entire desk in less than an hour, which is great. After the entire desk had been stripped or scraped, I went back with my 120 grit sandpaper and sanded everything down until it was smooth. I always feel a little bit weird about this, but every time I strip down something, whether it's painted or stained, and I see this awesome wood grain, I get super pumped and motivated to finish the project because I want to see what it looks like at the end. So I just wanted to share that with you guys. I have a surprise, but it's only a surprise if you didn't skip to the end. I'm going to put veneer on the top. No more laminate. Though I do like this laminate, it does not match with what my vision is for this desk. So we need to put veneer on the top. To prep the top for the laminate, I'm cleaning it with rubbing alcohol just to make sure that the surface is free of any impurities or anything that might cause an issue when it's bonding with the laminate top. Next up, I'm going to apply contact cement to both the veneer, which I've already cut to size. It is slightly bigger than the desktop, to the back of the veneer and to the back of the top of the laminate. Now you want to make sure that you have enough coats on here so that it adheres really well. It's also recommended when you have larger surfaces to put dowels in between when you are getting ready to adhere or bond the two surfaces. So I am using a chip brush. I am in my garage as opposed to being anywhere in my house. I recommend being outside when you're applying contact cement if possible. If not, be in a well-ventilated area, and make sure you read all the warning labels on the contact cement. I cannot stress this enough. It is flammable and it can cause irritation, so make sure you're wearing a mask when you're applying it. Also, it smells really strong, so just be forewarned. It does not smell good. I've officially become that person. My camera died when I was putting the veneer down, but I used 2 dowels and I carefully placed it down so that it was centered appropriately on the desk, and I'm using a J roller to apply pressure to the top so that there's proper adherence to the surfaces. I flipped the desk over and used a very sharp box cutter to cut the excess off of the veneer. And while doing this, sometimes you need to score it multiple times. Don't just tug on it, because what'll happen is you're going to create little breaks in the veneer, and that's going to show in your finished product. So just make sure that you're cutting it, and if you need to cut it again, just apply that pressure so that the cut is smooth across the grain and you're not ripping any of the grain out. We have another problem we need to tackle now. I put on veneer, but if you look at the drawer fronts, it's a slightly more purple color because it's a different type of wood. But we can fix that, it's fine. The way to navigate around different wood colors and tones is typically to experiment. I'm fortunate enough that when I added the veneer top, I had leftover veneer. And I also used the legs of the desk to test out different tones since I had plans to change them later. So I ended up settling on special walnut for the veneer top. Keep in mind, I did wait 24 hours before applying the stain, so that it didn't potentially interact with the contact cement. My original goal was to stain the desk in antique walnut, so the special walnut finish really kind of complemented that antique walnut stain well on the desk. I'm using a gel stain. This gives me a bit more control in the depth of color that happens on the rest of the desk. And it's General Finishes brand. It's another good brand to try out if you've not tried it before. Especially in antique walnut, which is my favorite, so I'm probably biased, but I really do like this color. When you're applying your stain as well, keep in mind you don't have to use a brush. In fact, you shouldn't use a brush if you can avoid it, unless it's a chip brush or one of those $1 sponge brushes, because you want to be able to push the stain into all of the different pores of the grain, and then when you wipe it off, you want to make sure that you go with the grain. So you put it on. You can put it on as haphazardly as you would like. And then when you take it off, what you're going to do is you're going to wipe with the grain as much as possible. Obviously on edges, you're probably going to go against the grain, but just go back over them and wipe with the grain. That way, if the stain dries and has maybe a little bit of streakiness, it will go with the grain and it'll look more natural. When I started to apply the stain to the body of the desk, I noticed that there was some contact cement seepage, if you will, and I needed to get that off. It's better to get it off now before you try to seal it, because the contact cement will cause the stain not to adhere. So what I'm doing is I'm just taking my same scraper and gently going over the stain. Now I'm gonna have to go back with mineral spirits and wipe it down and then restain it when I'm done. But I should have done this before I started staining. My bad, accidents happen. Just know that you can most of the time recover from these type of mistakes. It just is a little bit of extra work, not a big deal. Whenever you're refinishing something, you should always put a sealant on it. For this project, I'm using wipe-on polyurethane with a clear satin finish. This is an oil-based finish. As a note, if you've never worked with oil-based finishes before, do not apply them to light-colored painted surfaces. Pretty much the only paint color that I apply any oil-based polyurethane to is black, because oil-based polyurethane tends to dry with a yellow tinge, so this will discolor any painted surfaces. Now, wipe-on polyurethane is also different from polyurethane that you would get and apply with a brush, in that it goes on thinner. Because it goes on thinner, you have more control over the coat and you're less likely to have brush strokes or any kind of imperfections on it. You also need to apply almost double the coat. So I typically apply about 6 coats to the top and then about 2 to 3 coats to the body itself. I wanted to give this desk something a little bit extra, and to do that I took some Behr Marquee black paint with a satin finish and I applied black paint to the curved edge around the top of the desk. There's like a, I don't know what you'd call that. Leave a comment if you have a name for this part of the desk. It's like the side of the desk, but it's not really like a side. But basically what I did was I sealed it before I painted it because if you've watched any of my other videos, I don't like using tape. And if I seal it before I paint it, I can use a cloth to wipe off any parts of the corners where I might have went a little bit over. So if you don't like tape like me, I don't like not being able to see where my edges are, and tape kind of kills that for me. And being able to clean up the edges actively is better than having to sand it down after the fact and then start over. I just don't, it doesn't seem very efficient to me. Just a personal opinion again. But back on topic, I used a small craft brush paintbrush and I went around the entire perimeter of the desk where this little curved or rounded detail was with black paint. Both the desk body itself and the legs received a coating of black paint. I did 2 coats on each, then went back and looked for any touch-up areas, which it wasn't too bad. It was pretty minimal for touch-ups after the 2 coats. So we have the black detail around the trim of the desk, which complements the black legs on the desk itself. Kind of pulls everything together. So after I had the legs all assembled, I put the metal pieces back on the bottoms and I screwed them back on the desk because for the next part, I want to seal everything, including the paint. Before I applied the sealer, I used 400 grit sandpaper just to smooth everything out and make sure that any raised wood grain that occurred when I applied the finish the first time was knocked down. And then I had some cans of oil-based clear satin polyurethane, and I just sprayed a mere 5 coats of the polyurethane over the desk and allowed that to dry through each or in between each coat. Let's take a moment to look at the desk before. Remember, we had that laminate top on it, and this is what the finished product looks like. As always, I hope you enjoyed watching this furniture flip, and if you could click the like button on this video to make Lego a little bit happier, and click the subscribe button for more content like this. Thanks for watching!